But welcome to everyone to our session today on PR for Founders in the AI era. Now, delighted to be able to have Greg hosting this. I certainly won't be hosting this because I really have no idea about these types of things. But for founders, in terms of getting the message out there with their business, there's so many different ways of doing it. There's a lot of manual ways. There's a lot of sliding into DMs on scale. But sometimes founders are able to get into the news. And a lot of the time, you're able to do that through a PR agent. There's a job I used to have doing equity crowdfunding for startups, and to help make some noise about their crowdfunding campaign, we would often work with PR agents to try get into Startup Daily or the Financial Review. Those things always didn't come cheap from using the PR firm. Obviously, they need to earn a wage as well. So if you are a founder and you are trying to get into the news, you're trying to get some press around what you are doing, then any types of hacks to be able to help make that happen on a really low budget is so valuable. And so I'm delighted for Greg to be able to talk a bit about that, especially his background as a journalist. But he's also building a startup right now to help with this that he's also going to share as well. Now, before we do begin, I would like to also begin, as we always do, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm dialing in from. So based in Cremorne in Melbourne, still in the land of the Wurundjeri people. We'd just like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and any First Nations Australians who might be joining us on the call here today. But also joining from Cremorne Digital Hub, a few things to promote about things in general. I've added the website link to Cremorne Digital Hub if you're ever interested in hosting an event, in working out of the space. I was just chatting with some of the team. There's lots of opportunities there on the website that you can play around with, but also a few upcoming events. So we've obviously got this online session now, and we'll have a lot more sessions to add, particularly in the new year. But in the meantime, we still do have a few more events. There is one happening tonight, the year that was in venture capital. We did this one last year. It was just a summary of the year that was, some of the challenges, the opportunities, particularly challenges with this kind of climate that we're in now. But what are the opportunities in those challenges? We heard from 3 expert VCs last year, but it's obviously a very different this year to reflect on. So we'll be doing that tonight with 3 expert VCs. So still got plenty of tickets left for that. What we don't have plenty of tickets left for is the Christmas party on Thursday that we're running with Megan from Aussie Founders Club. We have hit the wait list. And so if you are interested in joining, just click on that link that I've just shared in there, and you can apply to join the wait list. Obviously, plenty of people cancel, and so we'll be able to keep people posted if we can fit people in. But without further ado, I am delighted to be able to introduce Greg to the stage. Now, I will let Greg introduce himself and his background, but in the meantime, I have shared Greg's LinkedIn profile here. We will try to make this quite an interactive session. So Greg's just going to just talk about some best practices for founders and how to get your word out, and some hacks, and also plug in what he's working on with his startup here. But do have his LinkedIn profile there. And then I will also just be setting up some polls for the day. And so to try to make it a bit more of an interactive session, and I'll also be in the chats as well. But I would love to introduce to the stage, if we could all give a big virtual round of applause for Greg.
Thanks so much, Des. Thanks for having me along and for organising this, and thanks everybody for turning up. I really appreciate it. Great intro from Des there. Covered a bit of ground already. PR's expensive, but it's also important. So that's what this is all about. The sort of thesis that I'm pushing is that you can do 80% of PR yourself. AI can help a lot with that. So that's sort of the entry point that I'm coming at this from. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be more confident in the knowledge that you can do your own PR, and have some specific templates that you can follow to do that. To get us starting though, I'd like to make this interactive. As well as being a former journalist, I'm also a former teacher, so a current teacher. So I like starter activities. So this is the first one for us. We've tried to set up a poll so you can answer these questions. It might not work, but we'll give it a go. So hopefully Des is on hand there. So I got a thumbs up. So which story got published? Let's put our journalist hats on. So let's just focus for now on headlines A. Genetics launches upgraded DNA platform. Would you read that? Would that get published? Or what about the next one? Controversial genetics startup raises $14 million Series A. Or 3, genetic startup debuts new testing kit amid rising demand. So we'll test our first poll of this. Which one do you think got published? Headline 1, 2, or 3? How's that one going? 'Okay, so we got 11 responses. I think that's pretty good.
Headline 2.
Yes.
I actually just guessed mine, but good to know.
So the answer there is correct. Headline 2. I'm now thinking maybe I made the alternatives a little bit too weak, but well done. Your journalist hats are firmly on. So moving on to the next one. Headline B, seaweed startups attract a surge of venture capital. Seaweed startup unveils new product range. Or number 3, founders explore opportunities in seaweed sector. So poll 2 coming up. Hopefully soon. It's not the exact headline. It's a summarized version because headlines can be quite long, but they have the gist.
Looks like A is a winner.
Looks like A is a winner as well. Yeah, fantastic. So very good. Correct. A is the correct answer. And let's do the final one before having a little recap on why those were the headlines that got covered. So headline C, BA for British Airways in hot water over denied baby care request. British Airways criticised after a crew member's baby care plea was rejected. Or 3, British Airways must pay £40,000 after denying mum's baby care request. So I'm going to be contrarian and go for the incorrect answer. I think brilliant. So those who selected option C are correct. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you chose the options you did. I think my brief breakdown on that would be going back to headlines A, as you correctly identified. We've got a $14 million figure there. That's quite a sum, and it's very specific. So the story, it's not the story in itself, but you've got a major metric there. You've also got the word controversial, and that is a bit controversial in itself because sometimes adjectives aren't journalists' best friends, but I think this one pulls you in because you've got the word controversial in genetics, and it stirs all sorts of thoughts that might get you to click on the article. Headlines B, seaweed startups attract a surge of venture capital. So there's a trend happening. There's a surge of venture capital that's obviously more of a trend than just the startup unveiling a new product range. So the fact that there's a broader trend happening there is probably why option 1 for headline B came through. And then again, headline C, number 3 was the correct answer. I wrote this article, and it's pulling on the emotional strings again. It's a mother with a baby care request. Straight away, you've probably got some sort of sympathy against the big corporate British Airways. And then again, we've got a specific figure. We've got £40,000, which is quite a lot that's not like a life-changing sum of money, arguably. So the specifics really come through. So at the bottom, we've got a quote there: emotion, trend, and numbers. At least one of those needs to be in your pitch, in your story, for it to be considered, preferably more than one. Okay, so moving on. Now, my introduction. So I worked for a journalist for over 5 years in the UK. I started with my training at the Press Association, which, if you don't know, is the UK's sort of main newswire service, and they have a media training element to that as well. So that's where I trained. Many of the UK's stories, I think it's over 50% of BBC news stories, will actually come via the Press Association newswire. So it's considered a hub of UK journalism. Then I moved on for my first job in the UK in London, working for the SWNS Newswire, which is a very similar newswire service to the Press Association. So we'd syndicate articles that would get sent out to lots of different outlets. So if you were a startup and you got covered on a newswire, that could be very useful for you, because a lot of different news outlets could pick that story up as opposed to just one. And then after working there during the pandemic, I moved to the Daily Mail, the newspaper, as opposed to the website. And I spent a year and a half there doing a whole range of roles. I started off as general reporter in London, covering court cases and protests, lots of protests at the time while I was there. And then I moved on to be a regional reporter to cover the Birmingham and Midlands area, where I'm actually from. And then I did some foreign stories as well, as I speak Spanish and French. So the foreign editor thought he could correctly save a bit of money with not sending somebody to support me with the language, so I could do both. So I covered quite a few roles there. So, and more pertinently to founders, I received lots of press releases in those roles. So I knew which ones I'd look at, and I knew which ones I wouldn't look at. So that's hopefully something I can draw on today. And as Des mentioned, I'm starting Signala. It's a company that is aiming to help founders and startups with their PR, a platform that guides them through it. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. Des, I'm not sure how you got on with the polls for who's in the room. We can skip through this one if you're still working away on that. I got 1 second. Okay. So this is just so I can get a bit of an idea about where you're coming from, what sector your startup or where you're working, what stage your startup's at, and whether you've had any successes already. I'd be really keen to hear about whether you had any press coverage. And then finally some barriers. Brilliant. Great work, Des, in the background there. Thank you. So what sector is your startup in? Obviously, it doesn't cover all sectors there, so there might not be an option for you. Sorry about that.
The startup isn't covered there. Just feel free to write it in the chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, some people work in an industry agnostic thing. We've got Hamish, a B2C personal data manager.
Yeah.
Just launched and seen the first signups, first journo call at 2 p.m. Love it.
Fantastic. How pertinent, Hamish. Hopefully I can answer a Q&A if you have a question at the end. Really happy to do that, and all the best with your call. Nice. So we got a couple of SaaS startups, AI, machine learning, health. 3 in health is the most popular category in medtech. 1 consumer, B2B, productivity and property tech, I'm guessing. Great. So that's good to know.
Nice.
Cool. Got a few people are still answering. Thanks very much for that. E-commerce popped up, consumer as well. I think we'll probably move on to the next poll question, Des, if that's okay.
Yep, no worries. Jonah, startup property and investment management.
Hi, Jonah.
Untapped greenfield lands for Indigenous groups. Love that. That probably would go into prop tech or other. That's quite niche, but I'm just going to end that. And so then you should be able to see that into the chat just here. Now, for the next poll, just because there's quite a bit of things to copy and paste, what I might just do is post that question into the chat just here. So we'll just do that via the chat, and I'll leave it over to you, Greg, to ask that question. But you can see that question just in the chat just here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll probably just stick with that as the final poll for now, so I can get on with the material. But yeah, really keen to find out what stage your startup's at, because that can have an impact on PR and whether it is a priority for where you're at right now. yeah, so your PR will depend on the stage of your startup and the kind of PR that you try and secure. Bootstrapped, thanks Mitchell, in testing now, great. Jonah in generating revenue in discussion with government investors. Nick, good to see you, thanks for turning up. Nick, bootstrapped, testing, pre-seed. Okay, I'm seeing a few pre-seed and seed coming up. That's great, so I can sort of tailor the advice a little bit better now I've seen that. Brilliant. So I'll probably carry on with the presentation now. Thanks for your answers, everyone. So the next slide, where are we? Like I said, yeah, hopefully you can do a large amount of PR yourself these days and getting easier with AI. So let's look at how you can do that. A lot of people will think when they're getting into PR that the announcement is the key bit, the key part of the story. So, oh, we have a new product. That's really the bottom. If we think of it as a pyramid, that's sort of the bottom layer. And if you don't have the top two layers, then it's probably not going to be converting into news story. So the other layers are traction. So you're proving that you've got interest, whether that's sales or income, or VC interest, and then trend or data. So is there a trend happening at the moment in your industry that is really pertinent? We'll look at some of those trends later. Or have you done some proprietary research yourself that has surfaced some interesting data that flies in the face of research that is out there at the time? So thinking about this pyramid can be a good sort of heuristic to think about your PR. So example stories. Okay, so each outlet obviously will have its different style. Back in the UK, sort of, and obviously you have the website here, Daily Mail will be very sort of emotive. This is sort of broad stroke speaking. Human hook, so we're looking at personal stories and conflict like we had in the British Airways article. That really gets attention. So if you can tap into anything like that, that can strengthen the story positioning. When you're looking at more financial-based and business-based publications like the AFR, Financial Times, really looking at broader industry shifts, what's happening in your industry at the moment. So if you can tie your story into broader industry trends, that's going to be a real tick for those kind of articles, publications. And then moving on to more tech-specific and startup-specific media like TechCrunch, they're really interested in growth metrics, data around how many users you're getting. So it's kind of more of a micro approach than some publication like AFR. So yeah, as it says there, different outlets say yes for different reasons. And often, ideally, you would tick all of those boxes. So there'd be a human element, a big trend underlying it, and then some proofs and some traction. So the more boxes you can tick, the better. When PR actually works. So one of the main pain points I have heard when talking to founders is they're spending a lot of money often with PR agencies and not getting the coverage. So adjusting expectations beforehand can help with the disappointment and also increase the chance of being covered. So there are only 3 moments. This is a very specific claim, but in general, there are only 3 moments founders should be spending time on PR. That's when they have some sort of proof, some major traction, some funding announcements, whether there's a trend that's happened in broader society that is very relevant to their startup and that they can trend jack to be to capture that news momentum. And then again, like I said before, original data. Have you got some sort of finding that others don't have? YC here stands for Y Combinator, linked to Sam Altman and OpenAI. A lot of founders don't necessarily have the right motivation when it comes to publicity. PR. It's not about the founder. It has to be for another reason. So it's the ego search for it is not really the best reason to be getting into PR, even though that is a natural pull. Okay. Turning the attention back onto you guys, I'd just like to ask you, based on your own startups, what strengths do you think you currently have around your stories? Do you think you could lean on the proof element? So are you getting some traction with your company? Is there a trend happening at the moment that you could jack, like a trend jacking approach? Or have you got some data that you could share? So if you could just type in, if you're willing to do that, to say which of the three you think you're most confident with at the moment in terms of your own PR. Let's give you a moment for that. Christmas coming. Is anyone really Christmas related? I suppose Christmas relates to a lot of people.
Oh, for getting PR.
Yeah, for getting PR. Is there any sort of trend happening at the moment? That could be AI is obviously a huge trend. Something maybe less known, climate technology.
It's a good point. I think anything that seems to have the word crisis on the end seems really good for the news. So any cost of living and less Christmas lights is something I saw in the news. People aren't doing as much Christmas lights because of the cost of electricity. I've had Mitchell refer to AI assisted coding. Have used AI assisted coding to make the entire platform. Okay.
Right.
Very cool. I imagine that's AI assisted coding is vibe coding, if that's the same term. I'm obviously not a very technical person. Nicholas has had 2 and 1. Amazing.
Brilliant. So I'll probably move on there. Thanks for those contributions. So just thinking about which areas your strengths are laying in at the moment for your PR and where you could perhaps work on it. AI is obviously changing all industries, PR no exception. Key points here. If you're not appearing on if your company in the later stages is not appearing on ChatGPT or Gemini or LLMs, it's becoming more of a problem. Obviously, at the pre-seed and the early stages, you wouldn't expect to be appearing, but later on down the line, it's something to think about. It's like it's not just getting news articles in the paper these days. It's about whether AI is going to be surfacing your company. So we're going to look into how to do that a little bit later on. I've just got a message there from Jonah. I'm pushing up against conservative institution grade founders who are waiting for proof, but keen to uncover themes for data. Okay, great. So they're onto you for that. Brilliant. So when it comes to LLMs, just in terms of which kind of publications are getting the most traction when LLMs produce their answers, we can think of it broadly as a three-tiered pyramid. So on the top tier, you've got publications like the Australian Financial Review and TechCrunch, which will be like AI trusts these publications a lot. So if you get covered in these publications, that's going to be really good for your LLM visibility. Then the next tier down is sort of niche publications, so industry media. So if somebody is searching specific questions about, say, climate tech, more of the topical details, then then LLM would lean more towards those publications. And then at the bottom of the tier is own media. And I think it's important to stress that even though own media such as Substack or LinkedIn posts are unlikely to get traction on LLMs, it's really important because when a journalist actually searches for you after you've pitched to them, they will be looking to see if you have much of your own media. And if you have, then it's just a big thumbs up and a green light that you are someone who's credible. So don't be disheartened with own media. because it's not necessarily powering your LLM results much. It's still important. Next slide. So I came across a really interesting article in my research for this presentation. And the claim was that funding articles are dead. So the point was, the money isn't the story anymore. Just because you raise a certain amount of money, that's not enough to get coverage. So that would be pretty much lower down on a pyramid. If you don't have like a significant sum, obviously that's going to make it harder for you to get published, but it's not enough. So the reason why that's happening, as argued in this article, is that obviously the economics of journalism is changing. Paywalls are becoming one of the main revenue sources. So that makes it even more important these days for these paywall publications to have exclusives. And a simple article about how much a company has raised in a funding round in itself is likely to be widely shared and not be exclusive kind of material. So the bar's raising when it comes to what you need to do as a startup to get coverage. When to skip PR entirely? Perhaps this is a counterintuitive slide, in that you think I'd maybe be telling you that PR is obviously the most important thing you should be doing, but actually, there are times where it's not worth trying, and it's not worth the effort. You kind of be banging your head up against a brick wall. So if you don't have any traction or users yet, then it's unlikely that you're going to get covered in the AFR. So maybe not worth trying at this stage. I mentioned ego before. If you're doing it for ego reasons, then it's probably not the best motivation, and nothing new. So I'd argue that all of you and in what you're doing, you have an interesting angle, but it's about finding that angle and presenting it so that the journalist sees it and says, okay, this is worth me looking at. So PR in perspective. Yeah, similar to the point in the last stage, VCs in the conversation I've been having recently would be saying that founders over-index on PR. They think PR is more important than it actually is. So it is important, but it's not more important than what you're building. It's not more important than your clients. So it's important to have that perspective when considering PR. Important, but nowhere near as important as what you're building. Owned and earned media. So for those of you who, if these terms are new, owned media is LinkedIn, articles on your website, things that you might publish yourself, and earned media is when independent news or media outlet will cover your company. Based on the name earned, it's obviously something you have to earn, usually by having credibility. Owned, obviously anyone could write a LinkedIn post, anyone could create a Substack newsletter. But it doesn't mean that owned media isn't important. For the reason I mentioned before, journalists, as soon as they read that pitch, the first thing they'll probably do is go on LinkedIn to have a look at you, or Google you. And if nothing's coming up in relation to your company or you as an individual, it's a big red flag. So think of owned media as something you have to do on the way to getting earned media, and it's a long-term game. So if you haven't built up your own media visibility, probably focus on that first rather than going for big publications. And I think a lot, as we identified earlier on, a lot of you in the pre-seed ideation stages. I think I am also with my company Signala. So my focus is definitely on owned media right now. Earned media is later down the line. Okay, reverse engineering. Why journalists say yes. Okay, so hopefully we can look at an example here. So this company is a fictitious company. It's called Safekeep. And I'd like you to tell me, this is a cloud storage company for law firms. secure document management, compliance features, enterprise-grade encryption, obviously based around all the cybersecurity risks. And I'd like you to tell me whether you think, as this description stands, do you think this would get any coverage in the media? Can I get a yes or a no? Couple of no's, probably not. Yeah, that's it. So unlikely as it stands to get coverage, but it doesn't mean that there's no potential for safekeep. And we're going to look at what we can do now to try and make safekeep a little bit more saleable when it comes to news. So this is one of the key frameworks I wanted to introduce to you. It's called the RIBS test. Is it relevant? Is your story relevant? If it's not connected to current trends, then that's one cross. Is it inevitable? AI is happening, and just because your company is linked to AI at the moment, that means you're more part of the norm as opposed to the exception. So that's probably not your lead. You're not going to lead on your AI involvement. Believable. Where's your proof behind what you're saying? Okay. Is there any funding? Do you have a certain amount of customers who signed up? Do you have you hit a certain revenue threshold that is notable? So that's the proof that we've mentioned previously. And then simple. Yeah, keep it simple. If it's over complex, then the journalist is not going to have necessarily the time or focus to try and dig out the story. You have to do that for them. So that's the RIBS test. So again, based on your own startups and your own potential stories that are related to your startups, could you tell me in the chat where you think your main weak spot is in terms of this RIB test? Just if you could put like a single word in, like relevant, inevitable, believable, or simple. Like what do you think you'd need to work on most for your PR coverage? Simple. Thanks, Dan. So I'm guessing you'd want to look at how to simplify your messaging. Inevitable. Thank you, Nick. See, it doesn't feel like the future. Relevant. Simple. Thanks, Tristan. Thanks, Jonah. So I'm guessing the point I'm trying to make here is that I think you can work on each of these areas just because on the surface it might not look like a relevant story connected to a trend. If you dig a bit, you can probably find that trend that it is connected to. There's all sorts of things happening. So on the next slide, okay, so now we've taken the same example of Safekeep, the cloud storage company for law firms. I'm going to try and find something interesting there. Okay, so we've done a bit of research, and 4 in 10 Australian law firms have been hacked in 2024. Full disclosure, I actually don't know if this is a genuine fact, but imagine it is. And that would be a pretty pertinent hook to attach to your story. So all of a sudden, Keep Safe is more newsworthy than it initially seemed. Okay, so back over to you guys. So a key point that I've heard from PR, obviously I worked in journalism, but the PR experts I was speaking to say that the pitch, the initial email that you'll actually send to the journalist is more important than the press release that's attached lower down, because that's the first thing that the journalist is going to see. And even more specifically, they're going to look at the subject line first, okay? So could you pick the strongest email subject line for Safekeep based on 1, 2, or 3, what you think? Just chuck a number in the chat if you can. Got a question?
Yeah, that was just me on my end.
Yeah.
I went with number 1, and I can see 3 was pretty popular. But when I think of like, what's going to catch like the attention of a really, really busy person, assuming the journalist is just getting slammed with like heaps of emails, especially people pitching journalists.
Yeah.
I would imagine Safekeep like the second would be no, because it's about them, and as in like it's about this startup, and the first word is just like, oh cool, but I don't care about the startup. I would imagine number one, just because like it's a fact, but I can see why number three is enticing, because it's new data and then it's actually got like some actual facts to it. Yeah, curious to hear your thoughts. What is the strongest group? Tell us.
Yeah, of course there's an element of subjectivity in this. It's not a science, but I'm seeing a lot of threes coming through on the chat, and that would be my instinct as well. I think the key point here is like, actually, Safekeep isn't even mentioned in this headline, and you'll see a lot of articles about where startups are mentioned. They're actually mentioned lower down in a story that's covering a broader trend. So I think that's a key takeaway there. It's really like, it's not, even though we're working with our companies every single day, and so we're inside the bubble, it's not about your company necessarily, unless, you know, that maybe there's a famous founder or you've raised over 20 million, or then it's a big deal in itself. But until you're at that stage, then you're in that sort of pre-seed territory where you're trying to jump on trends to get some visibility. So I'm just looking at a few of the messages there from Nick. Also think you need some kind of partnership announcement with the law firm to make it newsworthy. Yeah, really good point. So I think further down in that article, you would hopefully see the startup story come in there. Okay, so thanks for that.
Jonah had a.
I've got Jonah, yeah. Already pressures drive law firms to cloud tools to retain clients. Brilliant. Even better, Jonah. I wasn't expecting anyone to be so on the ball to suggest the fourth option. So I actually like that one. Of course, security pressures drive law firms to cloud tools to retain their clients. Brilliant. Jonah, you can take over from me at some point. You're killing it. Okay, the email subject line formula. Okay, so still on the subject line, you need to be specific within the subject line. Have you got some numbers in there, like we had in the previous example? 4 out of 10. News trigger, why now? Well, we're talking about how many cyber breaches happened this year, so it's timely. It's not 5 years ago. Credible. Sources, obviously we haven't got a mention of the source here. So I think we could probably strengthen this if we had a credible data source, like a government, say a government statistic body or something like that, or a think tank that's non-partisan if they exist. Boring and specific beats, clever and vague. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of pressure to seem clever and with it, but if you just give specific information that is interesting and new, then that will be cleverness. Okay, so now we're moving on from the subject line to the actual pitch of what you will write when you email and reach out to the relevant journalist. Notice relevant underlined there. So you've got to hook them somehow with some data or an angle. Some data or some sort of interesting intro in your first line. Angle, why does it matter now? Angle, why it matters at all? Why now? So timing, obviously news is about in the name news, it has to be kind of new, right? Proof, how do we know this is actually true as opposed to just a claim? And then what are you asking of the journalist? Okay, so we'll move on and look at an example now. So this is an article that I found on TechCrunch. Just a little, I'll show you the article just so you can have a quick look and then give you a bit of a summary. So hopefully you can see this. Are you bolding? There's an AI for that. All right. So straight away it's pulling you in. Is this relevant to you? Yes, I click on it, I'm reading it. It's got that human angle, which even though it's tech news, is transferable to all kind of news. If it's interesting to from a human level, then people are more likely to click on it. So I'm going to share the tab again so you can see 100-word pitch. Are you bolding? There's an AI for that. So hook, what's the hook? A real human moment. Being told you're bolding when you're not. So actually, this is where I should take a step back and explain what the article is actually about. So a founder got the idea from a hairdresser who wrongly told him he was balding, and highlighting how emotional and confusing hair loss is. I think I could agree with that statement. The industry is full of misinformation and unverified clinics on hair loss. So Cyriac Lefour, the founder, is tapping into that need, the trend of misinformation rising around hair. So he built an app to solve that, or to help solve that, called MyHair.ai. And it uses a dedicated AI model trained on 300,000 scalp images to detect early hair loss from smartphone photos. So users can track their changes over time with their hair and get personalized routines and find verified specialists, so they can avoid these scams that are prevalent at the moment. There's 200,000 early users, 1,000 paying subscribers, and clinical partnerships that they've already secured. And then we've got the broader market numbers. So hair loss is a $50 billion market, and founders believe AI can bring accuracy and transparency to it. So that's sort of the crux of the article, a bit of a summary. So how would you turn, sort of reverse engineering, how would you turn that article into a pitch for the journalist? So you got to hook them in. A real human moment. So this poor chap was told that he was balding when he actually wasn't, sending him into a bit of a frenzy. Next, to the angle, why does this matter anyway? Why? Because confusion, misinformation is on the rise, and it's costing people money and stress. Why is it relevant now? What's the news value to this? Well, AI is obviously a big trend, allowing these kind of apps to exist. Personalized healthcare, a massive area for AI growth, as you'll know, and it's a booming industry. So, and we got the credibility, we got lots of images analyzed, all these people who signed up for it. And then what's the CTA? What's the call to action? It's just offering a deeper interview with the founders, if you'd want to talk about that. So that's a little breakdown of how you might write your pitch. All right, so now we're taking what was a good story that made it to TechCrunch, and we're imagining how AI might have produced an opening line for the pitch. So I may be dumbing down the AI powers here, but maybe if you were Cyriac, the founder, you might have typed in something like, "Can you give me an opening line for my story?" So I'll just read, as you can see on the screen. This is something that AI might have pushed out. MyHair AI is an innovative and revolutionary app that uses advanced artificial intelligence to help users with their hair loss in a simple and convenient way. Lots of adjectives: innovative, revolutionary, lots of hype around that. Advanced, simple, convenient. Far too many adjectives. None of the proof that we had in the previous example. So this is for you guys just to use AI to help come up with a better opening line. So I'm just going to go over to ChatGPT, share my screen. New chat, copy in a pre-prepared prompt. So I've asked ChatGPT to rewrite this opening line with the data provided, and note the rules that we're prompting ChatGPT to follow. Delete all adjectives. No more innovative. No more advanced. Lead with the data or a real problem. Use only the data I provide. Do not invent data. Obviously, that's one of the main concerns about using AI, is that it's going to hallucinate or make up data, and keep it to one sentence. So I've given it the bad sentence that would be the previous AI generated opener. And I've given it the data, which I've already checked, or should have checked, is from a verified source. So I know that it's not pulling it from somewhere unreliable. And then just click send and just see what comes up. So it came up with: hair loss affects more than 50% of men before the age 40, and MyHair AI helps them manage it with tailored support. Okay, so I don't think it's brilliant, but then it's better than the previous one because you've got statistics, and then what's the trend? What's the facts, and how your app is tying into supporting that. Thanks, Jonah. So now go back to the presentation. So fluff versus ready. Get rid of the AI fluff and use AI to create a better option. Okay, this is another one that it came up with earlier. So I guess it's that message is if you put quality things into AI, it will give you quality outputs, and if you're lazy with it, it will give you lazy outputs. So it's as good as you want it to be. Moving on. Okay, so a few trends that are happening with AI, tricky trends, challenges that you need to be aware of as founders. Like most founders will try and personalize their pitch with a compliment. I love your recent article, big fan of your work. And then it might mention the article, which is so easy to do nowadays with AI. You can do that in a second. So it's becoming more of a problem than actually, it's fake personalization. It's not real. So you need to work harder to get their attention. And here's an example. Your freight cost story missed the SME angle. We're seeing new data on that. So as a journalist, I think, it would definitely catch my eye more. I might be a little bit pushed back by the fact that I missed the angle, but then I'm definitely paying more attention than a generic, I love your recent article. So really dig deep and try and find something that's going to catch their eye. Insight, real specificity cuts through, compliments don't. So I think that's got a general message that hopefully we all know. There are some very expensive media databases out there, which large companies, media tech companies charge a lot of money for. You don't need this at a pre-seed stage, and arguably after as well. You can just Google a little bit smarter. So I'm not sure if any of you have used this Boolean search term in Google before. So where you type in the site. So could I get a yes or a no from those who on the chat, for those who've used this search term to find a journalist before? Thanks, Nick. Yep. No, got a couple of notes, so let's go for it anyway. So I will move over onto Google and just do a quick search to help you identify.
That's a really interesting one. Just while you're getting that other tab,
thanks.
Does that just work for journos, or would that work for any trying to get anyone's email address?
I've only looked at this from the journo perspective. But I'm sure a slightly adjusted term might work for others too.
Because I'm not usually in a situation where I'm trying to get journos, but I'm running a conference and I'm trying to contact really high profile speakers, and I've just been Googling what's Kogan's email address, and sometimes you can find some.
There are definitely means and ways. So I've just typed in the site, afr.com, and then I put the specific search term next to it, startup climate. So say you're doing a climate startup and you need to figure out who to write to. So I'll click on this first article here. Young property entrepreneur gets set in green concrete startup.
And just a heads up, I have lost your screen sharing ability. Can you? Yeah,
sorry, I'm not sure what's happened there.
No, all good. But no, it's a really handy tool. So to summarize that prompt, did everyone get that? That was site -- techcrunch.com, and then you just type in the topic. I'll share that into the chat just here. Okay, cool.
So can you see my screen again?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So I've just typed in the prompt that Des just shared, and then often just on the news website where the article is, you'll see the reporter Sarah Petty and just usually if you click their name, there'll be a profile for that particular journalist and with their email there. So you just send your pitch to her. It says she covers commercial and residential property markets for the AFR based in Melbourne. Okay, so if that's relevant to you, then she might be your journalist.
And is this the main website of the AFR? Like, is there email just on there?
Yeah, it's just there. So you
okay.
go to the article that's relevant to your company, journalist here on the left, and there's a hyperlink on her name, and her email's just there.
I did not know journalists just have their email on there. They must get slammed.
They do, hence the need to make it pertinent for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start showing my slides again. I think we're a little short on time now, so I might have to speed up a bit.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, we might just leave a few more minutes if there's time just to rush through a few of the examples that you had in the rest of your presentation. And in the meantime, we'll leave probably just a few minutes for Q&A. So if anyone did have any questions specific to their examples, please do type it into the chat. Otherwise, I can pop someone off mute as well if anyone did have any questions. We'll try to leave a few moments for that while Greg's just finishing off the rest of his presentation. And if anyone does need to leave at 1 p.m, we might go a little bit over time, but if anyone does have a 1 p.m. meeting, no stress, you're welcome just to leave whenever you're ready. But we'll finish off just the last few slides of yours there, Greg, and then I can see Hamish has got a question, Jonah's got a question, so I might jump into those. And if you're happy just to rush through the rest of those there, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Jonah and Hamish. So Jonah and everybody, I've created a resource pack for founders doing PR. And I think Des is going to be sharing that in the chat at some point. And I'll just walk you through quickly what's in it. So thanks, Des. I'll share my screen. So on the left-hand side, you can see here, so I've got top 10 tips for startup PR in the coming year. A checklist of what you could do for your own PR you could do this today. So to guide you through how to go about it step by step. Angle finder. So getting your story angle is hopefully something you've picked up on is important. How do you find the angle for your story? I haven't really talked about how to create a press release, but it's quite formulaic and it goes through it here in detail resource 4. Some ChatGPT prompts for PR, some journalist outreach email templates, how to find journalists. So basically what I just showed you with the site link, PR timing, timing decision. So when should you do it and when shouldn't you? A decision tree, a reading list of some articles I picked out for PR for founders, and some publication guides depending on who you're pitching to help you tailor your pitches. So you've got AFR there, TechCrunch, and Forbes, and the rest. So I'll just wrap it up there and leave you a minute for a question. Sorry, I've gone over a bit there.
Oh, no, all good. We'll spend a few minutes over time just to run through some questions that people do have in the chat. Might start with Hamish's. How do you view running a company, Newswire-PR releases as owned media?
Okay, I want to make sure I'm understanding this question. So are you talking with the Newswire, just for those who are listening, so you've got two elements. You have an editorial Newswire, which sends out news stories to publications, much in the same way, and you'd pitch to them, much in the same way you'd pitch to a newspaper. And then you have a commercial Newswire where you pay for a press release to go out on Yahoo Finance, for example, and you'd get coverage by payment. You just have to tick their criteria boxes. So Hamish, are you talking about the commercial Newswire service or the editorial Newswire service?
And what I might do is, Hamish, I've just allowed for you to hop off mute if you happy to chat to that.
Otherwise, I could just go with an answer and hope that it's relevant. So, Hamish, I'd say that getting coverage in earned media, as in an article that's published, is going to be more valuable for your credibility. However, if you can get a press release published, which would cost around $1,000, I think, last time I checked, that would get you at least some coverage on Yahoo Finance or something, so investors can see that you exist online. So I guess it's a bit of a tier. Tier 1 would be getting something on a newswire that actually gets published in newspapers, news websites, and then tier 2 is the press release, a paid press release. So.
Perfect. Love that. Now, Joan has asked, we'd love to see the Google Docs link if that's something you're sharing. That should be the resources pack, but if there's another doc that I haven't shared, do let me know. Then we've got Nick, who has said, it seems like the highest chance of securing media visibility without a big budget or milestone announcement is to jump on an existing story as it develops. For example, we've heard that there's a massive data breach at Allen's this morning. We've built something to solve that. Your thoughts? I think that's a really good question, actually.
Fantastic. Yeah, Nick, you're on the money. Absolutely. Whatever's happening in the news that you can jump on, that sort of trend jacking approach that I mentioned earlier on, is going to be a really strong approach, especially if the link, obviously, from what you're doing at your startup to the announcement is a strong link and solves the problem that you're hearing. That's a really good approach.
Yeah, so I saw a lot of people doing that. I saw a lot of people doing that for like Taylor Swift. When she was in town, some businesses that had nothing to do with Taylor Swift were like, I don't know, trying to relate themselves to Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Des, as well, because if you jump on something that has a tenuous link, then it could backfire on you as well. So make sure that link's strong before you go for it.
Yeah, perfect. Anna's got a question. What does your startup do and how does that help in the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So in short, the startup is going to be an AI platform that builds in everything that I've kind of discussed so far in this presentation in an easy user-friendly interface, so that startup founders who are non-PR specialists can have their hand held through the PR process. So it's essentially all of these principles that I've discussed here. You can do, the key message I want to get away is you can already do 80% of this on your own quite easily with AI. You can do it well. But the product I'm creating, the service, is a cheaper alternative to agencies that will streamline this process that we've gone through today, from pitch all the way to publication and monitoring of how well the pitch is done. I suppose that's one element of communications is PR. So PR, I think, sits underneath the broader communications umbrella, and there's so many areas, other areas that startups should be interested in the communications area: misinformation, deep fakes, crisis communications, that are quite complex. But I'm also trying to build into the Signala platform to guide founders who can't afford the big PR budget but need a bit of support as they do that. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what I'm building at the moment. Anna, thanks for the question.
And where are things at the moment, Greg? Is it building the MVP? And
yeah, we're at the MVP stage. Have a software developer partner who is helping me with that. But I think I've had some really good advice, which I think is, even as a non-specialist developer building company, stay close to your product. You could easily offload it to a software developer and not really understand what they're doing. So I'm really trying to learn. Learn how to create the MVP myself, and then once it becomes something that's hopefully a broader users, then obviously I'll need to bring in the specialist support at that stage.
Yeah, love that. And just speaking of that, while we're on the topic of Greg's startup, he does have a survey that would just help him just with how he does build the product. So I've just sent that survey in the chat, and yeah, it'd just be quite helpful for Greg if people are happy to fill that out. Now, if people are happy to stay like another few moments, if anyone did have any other questions, we might pop them into the chat, and I've got a few more links for me to share as well. I've just got a quick example, Greg. This is not necessarily like a startup trying to get into the media, but I'll just go through an example of something recently. For those who were at the event a few weeks ago, we ran something here at Criminal Digital Hub with Megan from Aussie Founders Club, and it was the Great Victorian Startup Debate. And we just wanted to run this event because we read some articles in Startup Daily just about how bad the ecosystem in Melbourne was. And we're like, oh, it's not all that bad. And if you keep thinking it's bad, if the media keeps talking about how bad it is, then maybe that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe VCs move out of Melbourne. Why don't we have an event about that? And so it was all coming together, and we got some real heavy hitters as the speakers. But then, what Megan, who was running it with, she really wanted this to get into the news, and I was a bit strapped for time, and it just wasn't really a priority for me. But it was just something she really wanted to get into. It wasn't the ego thing talking about it. I think it was just the ambition of we're running this. Why don't we amplify the conversation? And we weren't selling anything or anything. So look, we tried a few things. And we're really lucky. There was a friend of ours, Marty, who used to work at the LinkedIn news team. So he was able to get some press in the news. And then Megan actually wrote an article that did get in Startup Daily. But if we had connected with yourself beforehand, what would be your advice? Just a bunch of people running an event, how to get that in the news? What would you have suggested?
I mean, the first question that comes to mind is who attended. So you mentioned big hitters. I'd probably try and lean on those. Are you able to say?
Yeah. So we had a councillor from the City of Melbourne who's very vocal in the startup and innovation economy. We had the CEO of LaunchVic. We had a VC in the area who's quite a big name, and then another VC from a founder who's quite a big name as well. And then we had a startup ecosystem operator who is actually he's somewhat of a big name, but he actually had wrote the original article that started this whole concept. And so for some of the journalists we were trying to pitch to, it was definitely 5 names they would be familiar with. So do you think just going harder on that would have worked next for another time?
I think names are strong, but they're not really enough. If there's not really a story there, a name probably wouldn't get it over the line, depending on the publication. Maybe the more industry focused publications have a lower bar when it comes to newsworthiness, and in terms of who's attended the event, that might get it across the line. But I think going back to the human interest and emotional pull of any news story, if you could tap into any sort of controversy, you mentioned there was the claim that Victoria wasn't a great place to be a startup. Well, and that seemed like this event was in a way kind of responding to that. So if you could tie in a bit of responding to this claim, and Melbourne really counters that claim. If you could tie into any controversy, that's a really tried and tested way of getting coverage. And then, of course, there are concerns attached with that, because you can have bad PR as well as good PR, right? So as long as you're confident that you could get a positive angle. But a key message I would take away for everyone here is that once your story is in the hands of a journalist or an organization, it's out of your hands. Usually they're going to do what they want with it, and no journalist is ever going to share what they're going to write with you before they publish it. 99% of cases. So there's a risk involved. So one of the points I wanted to make earlier on is I'm going to put the journalist hat on and think of the sort of negative angles and the connotations that a story might have when you put it in the hands of a journalist, and what it could be turned into, and try and preempt that before you send it to them. And then there'll be a decision, a judgment call, whether it's worth the risk or not. So I think thinking about the negatives is important, as well as the positives of PR.
Yeah, brilliant. Now we might start wrapping things up. I do have a few links and call to actions just to share at the end. But before I do take over, any other final words you'd like to share, Greg?
No, just thank you very much for everyone for attending. And please drop me an email if you would like to have a more tailored session where I can offer you some more specific advice. I won't charge for that, but I'd like to tap your brains of what you'd be interested in terms of the Signala platform as I build that up. So if you'd be interested, my Calendly link is there. I think maybe Des might share it afterwards. He's already shared it now ahead of the game. So just reach out. Happy to help and talk. Thanks so much for your